kicked my ass, he knocked me out. Maybe I don't got the heart for this no more. I would never do that. Listen, you think the great Mike Tyson would let something small like that discourage? Sometimes I struggle with the fact that, wow, there's a possibility I can really hurt somebody.
We wanted to believe the monster was immortal. We wanted to believe Iron Mike had beaten time itself. But at 59 years old, the world didn't just see a loss. We witnessed a near-death experience broadcast to millions. Why? Why did a man who has made $400 million push his body to the brink of organ failure for a fight he didn't need? The answer is darker than just a paycheck. This isn't a story about boxing. This is the tragedy of a man addicted to his own destruction. The body rotting from the inside. The tragedy didn't start in the ring. It started months before the first bell even rang, 30,000 feet in the air, on a flight to Los Angeles. 1 minute, passengers were sharing a cabin with a living legend. The next, they were witnessing a scene straight out of a nightmare. There were urgent calls for help, paramedics storming the tarmac. A frantic scramble to keep a heart beating. For months, the media gave us the polished version. They told us he was fine. They told us he was ready. But the whispers from his inner circle painted a different picture. A picture of a man who hadn't just fallen ill, but had stared death in the face and survived. Yet the real headline, the one that stopped the world, was the 2024 fight in Arlington, Texas. While the world was busy arguing over who won or lost, almost everyone missed the most terrifying detail of the night. It happened in the quiet aftermath, when the adrenaline wore off. Mike let slip a confession that should have stopped everyone cold. He admitted that during the heat of the battle, his mind just went away. He hinted at missing time, at blanking out while punches were flying toward his head. It makes you wonder, is this just what happens when an old warrior refuses to quit? Is this the delayed payment for 30 years of head trauma that doctors begged him to worry about? The experts warned him the bill would eventually come due. And now, looking at the hollow look in his eyes, it feels like that debt is finally being collected. We thought we were watching a comeback, but if you look closer, we might have been watching a tragedy unfold in real time. And the scariest part is, we ignored the warning signs until it was too late. It wasn't a right hook or an uppercut that nearly killed Mike Tyson in May 2024. It was his own stomach. We still call him Iron Mike, a nickname that suggests he is made of something durable, something that doesn't break. But the terrifying truth revealed on a flight from Miami to Los Angeles is that this iron is rusting, and he is breaking down from the inside out. Let's be very clear about what happened on the May 26th flight from Miami to Los Angeles in 2024. It wasn't a simple case of indigestion deep inside his gut. A peptic ulcer the size of a fist had ruptured. We aren't talking about a small sore. Doctors measured it at nearly 3 inches. It was a gaping wound in his stomach lining that had likely been festering for months, perhaps aggravated by the painkillers he needs just to function, or simply the cruel erosion of age. When that ulcer burst, it didn't just hurt. It triggered a catastrophic internal hemorrhage. 30 minutes before the plane was set to land, the situation turned critical. Nausea hit him first, and within a short time, Tyson was throwing up, but it was blood. He collapsed. He later described passing tar, a grim medical sign that your body is digesting its own blood. The cabin crew was forced to make that chilling announcement, asking for a doctor on board, while passengers watched a legend clinging to life on the floor. By the time paramedics reached him at the Los Angeles International Airport, the damage was catastrophic. In just 11 days following the incident, Mike withered away. He lost 26 pounds. He had bled out nearly half of his total blood volume. When he arrived at the hospital, he looked at the doctor and asked the only question that matters. Am I going to die? The doctor didn't say no. She didn't tell him he was going to be fine. She looked at him and said, "We have options." That is the terrifying code medical professionals use when death is a coin toss away. It took 10 blood transfusions to keep him alive. He survived, but he didn't walk away unscathed. He walked away with the knowledge that his body had tried to kill him. But the ulcer was just the explosion. The slow burn is even more painful to watch. If you look back at footage of Mike Tyson from 2022, you see a different kind of tragedy. Tyson being wheeled through Miami International Airport in a wheelchair or leaning heavily on a cane. This isn't just old age. This is sciatica, but on a level most people will never comprehend. The sciatic nerve runs from the lower back through the hips and down the legs. When it flares, it's like a live wire touching wet bone. Tyson has admitted that when the flare-up hits, he can't walk. He can't speak. The pain is so all-consuming that it renders one of the most articulate, boisterous voices in sports completely mute. His team calls it an occupational hazard, and now he is paying for it every single day. The wheelchair isn't a prop for sympathy. It is a glimpse into his future. It is the body saying, "Enough." But then, there is the detail that feels almost too grotesque to be real. Yet it perfectly symbolizes the rot taking hold. In late 2025, amidst the hype of his return, Tyson made a humiliating admission about his feet. He isn't just battling muscle aches, he is battling a disintegrating dose of foot fungus that he's had for decades as a result of his hardcore decaying of refusing to wear socks in the ring, a choice he made to look tough that is now eating him alive. He jokes that the fungus is his toughest opponent, but the laughter is hollow. This is the reality the hype machine tries to bury. We see a man defying all odds to prove that he still has the strength of his youth. But the medical chart tells a horror story. You have a man with a spine that locks him in a wheelchair, a stomach that tries to bleed him dry, and feet that are falling apart. He claims he is splendid now. He claims the ulcer was just a diet issue, too much bad food. But bodies don't lose half their blood because of a cheat meal. Bodies don't collapse into wheelchairs because of a bad night's sleep. This is systemic failure. This is the warranty expiring on a machine that was driven too hard, too fast, for too long. The world wanted to see if Mike Tyson could still fight, but the real fight had already taken place in a hospital bed where he was fighting for a survival chance. The harsh reality of life caught up with Tyson really fast. Despite being called Iron Mike, we see he was just a mere product of biology. And biology, eventually, always wins. Any rational human being would have taken the warning from the universe, sat in their armchair, and counted their millions. But Mike Tyson didn't stay down. He got up, he trained, and he stepped into the ring to fight a man 30 years his junior. Why? The prisoner of Iron Mike. It wasn't for the paycheck. He has plenty of those. It wasn't for the legacy. That was cemented in 1986. He pushed himself past the biological breaking point because of a terrifying psychological truth. Mike Tyson does not know how to live in peace. He is trying to prove something, not to the world, but to the reflection in the mirror. He is desperate to prove that the monster is still alive, because without the monster, he feels like nothing at all. And this is the most heartbreaking part of the story. He had the escape route planned perfectly. He had built a sanctuary. For a few years, it looked like Mike had finally found the exit door. He traded the violence of the ring for the tranquility of the cannabis industry. He launched Tyson Ranch, a vision of a 420-acre paradise in the Mojave Desert. Even when that specific dream deadpooled and the physical resort never materialized, he pivoted. He launched Tyson 2.0. He became a business mogul, selling Mike Bites, gummies shaped like Evander Holyfield's bitten ear. He turned his trauma into commerce. He was successful. He had a safety net. He even went back to his first love, pigeons. To understand Mike's heart, you have to look at the birds. He has owned thousands of them. They were his escape from the bullying of Brooklyn. The first fight he ever won wasn't for a title belt. It was for the honor of a pigeon named Julius. A bully ripped the bird's head off in front of 11-year-old Mike, and that trauma birthed the fighter. Pigeons don't judge. They don't want his money. He loves them so deeply that he once dumped a girlfriend just because she cooked and ate one of his birds. For a while, that was his life. The birds, the business, and the podcast. Hotboxing with Mike Tyson was more than just a show. It was public therapy. Sitting in that smoke-filled studio with everyone from Eminem to UFC killers, Mike was calm. He was vulnerable. He spoke about mental health and spirituality. He seemed like a man who had finally tamed the beast. But then, in April 2024, the podcast went dark. He shut it down. He warned fans about fake bookings. He walked away from the microphone and the introspection to go get punched in the head. Why throw it all away? Why leave the safety of the pigeon coop and the success of Tyson 2.0 to risk his life at 59? The answer lies in the dark psychology of trauma. Mike isn't addicted to money. He is addicted to chaos. Psychologists will tell you that trauma victims often destroy their own happiness because peace feels foreign. Peace feels boring. Worse, peace feels unsafe because it leaves you alone with your thoughts. Mike Tyson has spent his life in the eye of a hurricane. When the wind stops blowing, he panics. He has a God of War complex that he cannot shake. In his darkest interviews, he admits it. He only feels purposeful when he is dangerous. The tragedy is that a grandfather feels worthless unless he is hurting someone or being hurt himself. He is terrified of his own sober intensity. There is a revealing story that came out recently, a glimpse behind the curtain that explains everything. To prepare for a fight, Mike quit smoking weed. He wanted to be sharp. He wanted to be Iron Mike again. But the result wasn't focus. It was terror. His family, his wife, his children begged him to start smoking again. They couldn't handle him sober. Without the numbing agent of the cannabis, the old rage returned. The intensity that made him a champion in the 80s makes him a nightmare to live with in the 2020s. So here is the prisoner. If he stays sober and fights, he destroys his body. If he smokes and seeks peace, he feels like a nobody. He fights not because he loves the sport anymore, but because he doesn't know who he is without the violence. He is trapped in a loop, chasing the high of a knockout that his body can no longer deliver, running away from a peace he desperately needs but cannot endure. The world saw a boxing match. But what we really witnessed was a man trying to outrun his own shadow, only to realize that no matter how fast he moves, the shadow is always waiting for him in the corner. That shadow finally caught up to him in Arlington, Texas, the fight of the century. When Mike Tyson walked into the stadium in Arlington, Texas, the world screamed for blood. 80,000 people in the stands and millions watching at home were united by a single desperate delusion. They wanted to see the clock turn back. They wanted to see the black trunks, the no-socks look, and the ferocious bob and weave that defined the most terrifying heavyweight era in history. But the illusion didn't shatter with a punch. It shattered before the first bell even rang. It shattered with a piece of black neoprene. There, wrapped around the right leg of the former baddest man on the planet, was a black compression sleeve. a stark, undeniable symbol of fragility. In the 1980s, Tyson was a kinetic ball of energy, generating power from the ground up, his legs acting as pistons. Now, that brace depicted worn-out cartilage and grinding bone. It was the first sign that this wasn't a fight. It was a public execution of a legacy. The opening bell rang, and for a fleeting minute, maybe two, the legend appeared. Tyson came out with that signature crouch. He landed a couple of shots. He showed a glimpse of his natural spacing, the instinct that is burned into his DNA. For those first few moments, the crowd roared, suspending their disbelief. The collective roar was the sound of the world praying for a miracle. But then, reality set in. And it set in hard. By the third round, the ferocity we were promised had evaporated. Mike wasn't bobbing, he was plodding. He wasn't weaving, he was waiting. The knee brace seemed to grow heavier with every minute. His balance was gone. When Jake Paul threw looping rights, Mike didn't slip them with the lightning speed of 1986. He simply absorbed them or covered up. The explosive combinations were replaced by single, labored jabs. He was biting his glove, a nervous tick of a man trying to reset a brain that was lagging behind the action. And this brings us to the most painful realization of the entire night. The tragedy wasn't that Mike Tyson lost. The tragedy was how he lost. If Mike had gone out on his shield, if he had been knocked out cold while swinging for the fences, it would have been sad, but it would have been honorable. It would have been a warrior's death. But that is not what happened. Instead, we witnessed the ultimate humiliation for a man of his stature. He was shown mercy. Jake Paul, the 27-year-old YouTuber, the kid from the Disney Channel show Bizaardvark, the influencer who made his name doing pranks on Vine, decided to spare the life of Iron Mike. The speculation isn't just internet conspiracy fodder, it came from Paul's own mouth. In the post-fight interviews, Paul admitted it. "I wanted to give the fans a show," he said, "but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt." The man who built a career on being the most feared striker in the world was treated like a fragile antique that needed to be handled with care. A review of the tape from the later rounds confirms this reality. Paul pulls his punches. He steps off the gas. There were moments, clear, undeniable moments, where Paul had Tyson defenseless against the ropes. Mike's legs were gone. His guard was down. A serious heavyweight contender would have finished it. But Paul hesitated. He tapped him. He moved away. He didn't want the visual of a 58-year-old legend unconscious on the canvas on his conscience. Critics and former pros like Tony Bellew saw it immediately. They saw a young man carrying an old man. They saw a fix, not in the sense of a scripted WWE match, but in the sense of a gentleman's agreement not to inflict catastrophic damage on live television. Paul was managing the fight like a sparring partner. He was protecting his investment, sure, but he was also protecting Mike from himself. This mercy is infinitely worse than a knockout. A knockout implies the opponent was a threat that had to be neutralized. Mercy implies helplessness. It implies the opponent is a child or an invalid. For Iron Mike, the man who once said he wanted to push his opponent's nosebone into their brain, being carried by a social media star is a stain that will never wash off. And what about us? What about the crowd? The atmosphere in the arena underwent a sickening shift as the fight dragged on. In the first round, the energy was electric. Bloodlust and nostalgia mixed together. But by round 6, round 7, and finally round 8, the mood soured. The cheering stopped. A strange, uncomfortable silence settled over the stadium. We realized we were complicit. We had paid money to watch this. We had fueled the hype machine. They had demanded that a grandfather step into a cage with a lion, only to realize if the lion had decided to maul its prey, The grandfather would be completely defenseless. The excitement turned to guilt. We weren't watching a sporting event, we were watching elder abuse, sanctioned by a commission and sponsored by a betting app. The rigged claims flooded the internet before the final decision was even read. People were certain that it was staged. But deep down, most people knew it wasn't staged in the traditional sense. It was just a mismatch of biological reality. Tyson was fighting through a torn-up body, an ulcer history, and nearly 6 decades of wear and tear. Paul was fighting with a torn ligament in his ankle and still looked like he was moving in fast-forward compared to Mike. When the final bell rang, there was no tension about the decision. It was unanimous. It was obvious. But the final image wasn't of two warriors. It was of Jake Paul bowing to Mike Tyson in the center of the ring. The bow carried a veneer of reverence, yet it could not hide the underlying pity. Mike Tyson stepped into that ring to prove he was still immortal. He wanted to show that he could cheat time. But all he proved was that Iron Mike is dead. The ferocity is gone. All that remains is a man in a knee brace, surviving on the charity of a YouTuber who grew up watching his highlights. Paul got the win. Tyson got the paycheck. But the audience got the hard truth. The only undefeated fighter in history is Father Time. And not even Iron Mike can win that fight. If he can't win the fight against Time, then the only other reason to step into the ring is the payout. But if you think Mike did this just to pad a savings account, you don't understand the tragic economics of being Tyson. The financial why. Is he broke? Whenever a legend returns to the battlefield long past their prime, the world asks the same uncomfortable question. Does he need the money? When we looked at Mike Tyson in that ring, sluggish and braced at the knee, taking punches from a YouTuber, we weren't just worrying about his brain. We were worrying about his bank account, because the history of Mike Tyson isn't just a story of knockouts. It is the most spectacular financial train wreck in the history of modern sports. To understand the desperation of 2025, you have to look at the excess of the 1990s. Mike Tyson didn't just spend money, he incinerated it. At his peak, he amassed a fortune estimated at over $400 million. For most human beings, that is generational wealth. For Mike, it was pocket change. He lived in a reality that had no connection to the value of a dollar. We're talking about a man who bought a 52-room mansion in Connecticut that had its own casino and nightclub. We're talking about a man who walked into a dealership and bought luxury cars for strangers. He spent over $2 million on a 24-carat solid gold bathtub for his first wife, Robin Givens. But the most outrageous expenses were probably his exotic pets. 3 Bengal tigers that cost $70,000 each to buy, and another $200,000 a year just for maintenance. By 2003, the inevitable happened. The $400 million was gone. Not just gone, he was $23 million in the red. He filed for bankruptcy, a broken king in a palace he could no longer afford. But Mike didn't just lose his money to bad shopping habits. He was bled dry by the most efficient financial vampires in the game. The architect of his ruin was his promoter, Don King. Tyson eventually sued King for $100 million, exposing a level of fraud that was almost impressive in its audacity. King wasn't just skimming off the top, he was running a complex embezzlement scheme. He charged Tyson for renovations on his own personal offices. He put his family members on the payroll for exorbitant salaries to run fan clubs. He inflated travel expenses and hid revenue from foreign broadcast rights. He even set up puppet managers, Tyson's own friends, John Horn and Rory Holloway, to bypass regulations and take a 50% cut of Tyson's purse before Mike even saw a dime. Tyson was a young man with no financial education, surrounded by people who viewed him as a renewable resource, and that illiteracy burned. He later settled with King for $14 million in 2004, but he never touched that money. Every cent went to the IRS and the creditors who were lining up to pick the bones clean. So, fast forward to today. The narrative is that Mike is back. He's the face of Tyson 2.0, a cannabis empire that sells Mike Bites and premium strains. We are told he is a business mogul, and it is true that he has pulled off a miracle comeback. Between the Hangover movies, his podcast, and the weed business, his net worth has climbed back to an estimated $30 million. But if he is worth $30 million, why is he letting Jake Paul use his head for target practice? Why risk brain damage for a $20 million payday if you are already rich? This is where the cannabis empire myth hits a wall. $30 million is a lot of money to the average person. But to Mike Tyson, that is a rainy day fund. The reality is that Mike's burn rate, the amount of money he needs just to maintain his lifestyle, is likely astronomical. You don't live the life of a global icon on a budget. The security, the travel, the legal fees, the lifestyle maintenance, it all adds up. There is a dark speculation surrounding his handlers today. Who is pushing for these fights? Are the people around him protecting the man, or are they milking the cash cow one last time before it collapses? Just like in the 90s, Mike is surrounded by a machine that needs fuel. And the only way Mike Tyson knows how to make quick money, the kind of 8-figure injections that keep the machine running, is to bleed for it. But there is a reason beyond the bills. It's the addiction to relevance. Mike Tyson cannot live a quiet, $100,000 a year life. He doesn't know how to be a suburban retiree. He needs the roar. He needs the spotlight. He needs to feel like the center of the universe, even if the universe is laughing at him. The tragedy is that his lifestyle and his ego are trapped in a feedback loop. To maintain the image of Iron Mike, he needs the money. To get the money, he has to destroy the image of Iron Mike by losing to influencers. He isn't fighting for rent money. He is fighting to feed a lifestyle that has been eating him alive for 40 years. The leeches might have changed faces, and the tigers might be gone. But the dynamic remains the same. Mike Tyson is an industry, and the factory floor is a boxing ring. And as long as the factory is open, he has to clock in, no matter how much it hurts. But while the money comes and goes, there is one debt that Mike is accumulating that can never be paid off. It's a debt being collected not by creditors, but by his own nervous system. The invisible injury. The most damaging scar Mike Tyson carries isn't the tribal tattoo on his face or the surgical marks on his back. It is the injury the cameras cannot capture. It is the cumulative, silent damage inside his skull. While the world obsessively debated his muscle mass and punching power before the fight, the discourse ignored the most fragile organ in his body, his brain. To understand the decline, one does not need an MRI. The evidence exists in the archives. Footage from 1987 reveals a 20-year-old Tyson who, despite a lisp, possessed a razor-sharp mind. He spoke in rapid-fire bursts, analyzing technique and quoting history with clarity. Contrast that with the man today. The cadence has slowed to a crawl. There is a processing lag, a distinct delay between question and answer. His speech is heavy and tired. While dismissive fans label this stoner talk or the relaxed vibe of an older man, neurologists perceive something more concerning. This visible decline has birthed a storm of speculation, most notably surrounding Parkinson's disease. The theory gained traction when Jake Paul, in a careless moment on a live stream, claimed that toad venom had cured Tyson's Parkinson's. Although Paul quickly retracted the statement, and Tyson's handlers issued a denial stating Mike was perfectly healthy, the rumor persisted. It persisted not because the public believed Jake Paul, but because the visual evidence was hard to dismiss. The tremors in Tyson's hands and the stiffness in his gait are matters of public record. Boxing at 59 creates a different physiological risk profile than boxing at 29. As humans age, the brain loses volume and shrinks away from the skull. 1. This atrophy creates a gap. When a young fighter takes a hit, the brain is cushioned by a tight fit. When a 59-year-old takes a hit, the brain has room to accelerate. It rattles inside the cranium, slamming into the bone with amplified force. This explains the lost time Tyson admitted to after the Jake Paul fight. It was not a lapse in concentration. It was likely a concussion. It was a neurological short circuit caused by shearing forces inside his head. By stepping into that ring, he courted the risk of a subdural hematoma, a brain bleed that can prove fatal in seconds. Tyson has not been diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. Currently, the disease can only be confirmed during an autopsy. Yet, Mike himself understands the cost. He has spoken publicly about brain trauma and the price paid for his glory years. This leads to the most somber parallel of all. The world has witnessed this trajectory before. Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight in history, deteriorated in full view of the public. The man who floated like a butterfly eventually froze into a statue because he refused to stop fighting. Ali took punishment against Larry Holmes when he had no business being in the ring, and the sporting world recoiled in horror. In the aftermath, a collective promise was made. Never again would a legend be consumed by the sport in such a public fashion. That promise has been broken. Mike Tyson is walking the same path as Ali. He is trading cognitive function for the applause of a crowd that will move on to the next viral moment by morning. The tragedy isn't just the potential for future illness, it is the possibility that he is already trapped. Mike Tyson survived the hood, prison, Don King, and addiction. But it seems he cannot survive his own ego. He is plagued by the gladiator's curse, believing he must die in the ring to prove his strength. And this is a tragic sight for those who love him. And now we have to ask ourselves, is it time for us, the fans, to stop watching? Because as long as we pay, he will fight. And if he fights again, the next tragedy won't be a loss. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and hit the subscription button. Click on the next video on your screen for more contents like this.